G'day and welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to do another one of my information videos, or it's a little bit of a maybe a re-information video. I don't know how you'd really put this. Listen, what it's talking about actually is some of the comments that I see occasionally, but it's not just comments, it's all over the place. It's a little bit of, be it dogma, be it old school thinking, be it I suppose, listen, be it whatever it is. What we're actually talking about is three comments. One would be get your heels down. Two would be why do you break your cheek weld? And three would be you've got to get yourself lower to the ground. And listen, those are the 3 points we're actually talking about. Those are 3 things which are talking about really about a shooting form, a prone shooting form that I use, which I have found extremely beneficial, works really well, and designed out of critical thinking, something that's all too rare in this day, but that's where it comes from. And I think the comments that come are really from the trained, a little bit of the trained well, a little bit of military dogma, a little bit of things that work really well for some people, and were made rules for people, which is the likes of the prone shooting position, where people laying with their legs spread out wide, their heels down on the ground, because that's going to make you shoot better, with getting as low as you possibly can, because the lower you get yourself to the ground, the more stable things are going to be, so the better you're going to shoot. And that when you are shooting your rifle, if you run a magazine or you put your rounds in without moving your cheek guard, without breaking your eye contact, without breaking your whole your head and eye contact or head position to the rifle, then you're going to be more accurate. All things that have had relevant points in circumstances in times gone by. I will put a caveat on all that stuff to say, listen, if what you do works absolutely perfectly or works as well as you've found, then don't change for what I've got to say, for what anyone's got to say. You do what you're doing. And if you have to stick with what you're doing because of your club rules or whatever it is, okay, you've got to stick with what you're doing because of your club rules or whatever. But what I would talk about, and I suppose I'd go through the 3 points. One would be, or two are really the same thing in a different form. One is get yourself as low as possible and get your chest down, get everything squashed down on the ground so you'll be more stable down there. Which is probably very similar to the legs out and heels down that we're talking about. That is the 2 very obvious things to look at, but they're probably really the same thing. Now, largely, where this came from, what this really is, when you understand it, where this came from, it's really more military based. And largely it's talking about what the military has been over many years, more so if you go back 50 years ago, but largely young fellas, little guys. Yeah, maybe little girls as well nowadays, but largely what it was little guys. 100 pound, 120 pound, 18-year-olds. Little fellas, were out there, learned to shoot, and really they were learning to do this from cadets. So we're talking 80 pound, and we're talking 15-year-olds. We're talking young guys behind what was probably the 3006, might have been the 308, but largely in your Lee Enfields and that type of rifle, which had no muzzle brake, which had a decent amount of kick, not much compared to the big stuff we shoot nowadays in the way of the power, but in a hard stock, no muzzle brake form with a little person shooting it. Simple as that. Whether they were tall or they were small, they were light muscled, light young guys shooting these things. And light young guys are probably the most likely to stuff it up. They're going to wriggle, they're going to do things, they're going to flinch, they're going to do bits and pieces. So the instance you want to do in that situation, very simply, apart from not saying they're all young guys, I was a young guy too, I was also my own level of useless too, and there were better and there were worse and all that sort of stuff. But what I'm trying to say is the best way you're going to train them to shoot as well as they possibly can is by getting them as grounded as you possibly can, so the rifle pushes them around as little as possible, and they have as little control over wriggling around and doing bits and pieces. So if you get them flatter to the ground, where they are flattened out, gripping the ground by their surface tension of more of them flat on the ground. That's going to help you in that situation. If you do things like take their toes off the ground, the things that are wriggling around and doing stuff and trying to fight the recoil by gripping the ground, if you take them and flatten them out, put the heels on the ground, they don't have any control, so it's just then down to the trigger pull. You've removed half your problems. Nothing wrong with that, and there's a lot of guys that shoot very well with that, and there's a lot of guys that learn like that and they go through, and that is their comfort zone. That is where they're most comfortable and they shoot the best at. So there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But once you start to get a little bit older, or a little bit stiffer, or a little bit stronger, or a little bit heavier, or basically maybe have other things, other muscle developments other than laying flat on the ground as flat as you can be, that it might not be that comfortable to be in that position. So let's walk through what we're actually talking about. If you're after more stability to the ground because of the traction you needed, because of the amount the rifle pushed you around, that sort of stuff, that's largely answered by being heavier. Stronger, fit, all that sort of stuff, yeah, that might help as well, but largely heavier answers that. The problem of being removed by the rifle is largely answered by the fact that you've grown up a little bit. The next bit that's been answered by is largely we're not shooting a woodstock, hard butt 30-06 anymore. Even if we're shooting a monster, it's probably got a muzzle brake, it's probably got decent weight, it's probably a reasonable sort of rifle. So it starts to change that equation as we're not really gaining anything by getting ourselves flat to the ground. So if there's any discomfort in getting flat to the ground, that just became a negative that isn't really needed. The next bits I'd talk about, which is with your heels down, one of the logics that I've certainly heard is that with people, and I can see in places, with people trying to resist recoil and things with their toes, or moving around between things and changing things because they're not set up properly, okay, there can be a negative there. That's what practice is about. That's what learning your shooting form, that's what it's about. Once you know what you're doing, you can sit there with your heels up, not influencing your shot, but able to reposition yourself, whether you're moving back a little bit through recoil, whether you're repositioning yourself onto your rifle, wherever what it is, and when yes, even when 200-pound guys get moved around a little bit, no matter how flat we'd be on the ground, when you've got 250 grains of powder pushing your back. So being able to reposition yourself, being able to be comfortable, position yourself by having your toes in gear isn't a terrible thing. The only thing to keep in mind, the bit that goes with that, is you're not using your feet for traction. You've got enough weight. You've got enough weight in your chair, I don't keep my chest off the ground, my gut, my hip, my thighs. There's weight in those. There's also muscle in those. There's also fat in the gut, but that's enough in the way of that side of things. I use my arms are on the ground by trying to get my chest up, so my heart and my breathing, all that sort of stuff, are not being constricted, not influencing my shot. And then I've got my middle section that is working for me. And yes, I'm 220 pounds, but my little missus, who is nowhere near, nearly half my weight, she is able to shoot the same fashion, and with moderate rifles there is no issues by doing that same sort of thing, and comfort is king in this situation. Good control over your A-frame and shoulders and things like that, but comfort is king, and that's with the heels up. So I get it breaks the rules, it breaks that dogma, it's not what some people want to see, but really I would put comfort and control in front of a rule that was designed for someone that's less than half my size. I understand where it came from, we just ain't there anymore. And like I said, that also moves into the forend. Up at the front here, once you put your chest down the ground, I understand it when you haven't got enough weight. I get that side of things, and you're shooting off a bag or whatever it is. The lower you get, the more attached to the ground it is, it starts to work better. Or you're trying to use your arm as a rest, that sort of stuff. I understand you're getting down because of those reasons. The moment you go to a bipod, and let's be serious, unless you're shooting off a rest or a bipod in the prone position, then you're just doing something for competition or because you've got nothing else. But largely, even in a hunting form, you have something up the front here. So you have the choice of height. By making your bipod wider, you make it just as stable. So it works without too much fuss up the front there. The next bit is down the back here. So when you are shooting just off the shoulder, then there are ways, and we've done some shooting form things like that, but there are ways to do this, largely about getting your shoulder and everything stable. I use the bone structure, these stiff bits in the middle of the fleshy bits. I use the bone structure, nice strong A-frame, to get the chest up and get it solid, get that a nice, not solid, but it's a strong frame, and then I run off my collarbone with a rifle. So everything is comfort. I want my head as straight as possible. I want my chest up so I breathe comfortably, easily, and then I've got the weight behind that to do that side of things. Now that works really well, and it doesn't run into the other problems of the really twisted, sore neck out of trying to squeeze my head up. Yes, when I was 16, 17, 15, 25, that would have been a lot easier, but not so easy from that point forward. If you can get it more comfortable, put less tension in those places, it's going to shoot better for you. But the big deal I'd really go with is that with the equipment we've now got, what we can actually do, I run an adjustable bag base, but once you've got to real precision stuff and you've got something to rest at the rear of the rifle, then make it the comfort where you are, make it the height where you're most comfortable at. There will be benefits out of doing this, without question. Squashing yourself on the ground, you're not getting any more stability. The rifle's probably heavy enough. The platform you're using, you set up to suit, and then you'll be comfortable for the human. So that goes into that last bit, which we're actually talking about, which in those three was about the cheek weld. We've all seen from the Hollywood side of it to it used to be trained a lot more. I haven't seen it trained that much anymore. But was this whole put the bolt in, feel the bolt, put the bolt down, keep that eye behind that scope, keep it all dead straight, and you're going to shoot better. Now for some people that really works. Largely I'd say if you get any benefits out of shooting like that, there's two things I would say that, listen, it works for you, leave it alone, but it doesn't need to be that way. There's two things that are really important. And I suppose I'll go into why that actually works to start with. Why does that make a difference with having your eye in exactly the same position, keeping your head exactly the same position? There's a little bit of, in a military sense, observing in your scope, seeing what's going on, that sort of stuff. Yeah, okay, that's a different thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your shooting, your group, and how accurate you're going to shoot. Two things. One is your equipment you're using. When you have a unparallaxed scope, an optic, or something that's got issues, and it's not set up properly, then your exact eye position changes things to a degree. So just keeping that, and you've got to have really good form to be able to hold it in the still night position, but that could help a little bit with that equipment. So everything stays exactly the same. Better equipment set up properly, yeah, it's not so much of an issue. But the biggest deal I would say is this is actually about trigger time. If you don't have much trigger time, you're not familiar with being able to get onto a rifle and get back to exactly the same place all the time, then it can help out of your whole form, not just your eye position, but your whole form, where your head is, where your whole body is, everything it is. If you stay attached the whole time, then you do the same as last time. It's comfortable for you, and you'll notice between me and Sam, especially when we're shooting the likes of 22, she'll just function away nice and comfortably in that spot. She's about half my size. So when I'm shooting something like a 22, generally there's a certain amount of discomfort, a little bit attached to the fact that I'm shooting something that she can shoot. So length of pull, there's when we jump on a rifle from one rifle to another rifle, or sorry, from one person to another person, the same rifle, I will shoot in the compromised form. I will have where that length of pull is way too short for me, so I've got to squeeze it away from me to get the eye picture. And Sam will be to where maybe it's a tiny bit not perfect for her, it's a little bit longer, but it's much more comfortable for Sam. So it's a little bit easier for her to function in that sort of form, and she's more comfortable doing that. I will tend to break, I'll tend to look away, and I'll do that with all things. I'm very familiar with going to get my brass, doing whatever it is. That's another thing. I have my brass on my left hand side and I tend to put it on the right hand side. My two hands work together quite well, but also I'm on the left hand side, so's my ammo. I'm a right hand shooter, that's how it goes. But anyway, being able to go over there, look at this, check the brass properly, come over here, put all that sort of stuff, I'm doing the whole shooter job. I'm not just using the other people's ammo or other bits and pieces. I am doing the whole thing, so I do the whole lot, and I want to be aware of that while I'm doing it. But when it comes to on the rifle, off the rifle, on the rifle, on the rifle, off the rifle, sorry, but when I'm coming back to it, I feel it instantly. I get a very quick, and this is not special human, this is simply trigger time, that I am very able to get comfortable on there, and then I'll get back to it. Even when I find, and I'm sure lots of good shooters out there or people with lots of trigger time out there do, I might, to start off with, do some wriggling around to get everything working out whether I'm using where it is on my face is where the point is for this scope combination, rifle combination, that sort of stuff, and they'll be different. I'll be up on the cheek, and I'll be down the jaw, and I'll be halfway between, and I'll be just on my chin. There's all sorts of places in dealing with what I'm actually shooting in front of me. But once I've found it, that tends to be it. I don't tend to even don't go looking a second time. Once I've found it, I can look away, go back, and that's automatically programmed in where it does in my face. I go to my vision, and I've instantly back to that comfort point. That's trigger time. That's just practice. Now, of course, you don't have the trigger time, you don't have the practice, you can't get comfortable, then staying engaged is going to help you. And fully, that works for you, that's what you need, you do that. But don't think it's a negative. If you're comfortable and you get back and you find that position really easy, you go through that sort of stuff, you set up your equipment properly, there is absolutely no negatives to doing whatever you do between shots. Getting up, running around is probably a negative, but when it comes to staying there engaged with the rifle, lifting your head up, looking at your stuff, sorting your stuff out, racking the bolt, getting back down there, there's just no negatives if we're in a practiced, skilled shooter's ability to pull off the group in an accurate form by doing it that way as well. And certainly going to where you're feeling and double checking and doing that sort of stuff and keeping engaged and all that type of thing. Hey, listen, like I said, if you're keeping an eye on someone in the scope, completely get it. But if it's just about accuracy, no, you can do it with good practice and good form, good equipment. You don't need to worry about that sort of stuff. Anyway, that's probably, like I said, this stuff is all out of, and let's finish that off with, this is not out of what I was taught to do. This is out of in some cases, not the opposite, but different to what I was taught to do, but by actually thinking, by going through the process of, well, critical thinking, working it out, making sure it makes sense, stopping and not just doing what I was comfortable with, making sense of what it is, why the thing I was doing and or being comfortable with or was being led towards, why was I doing that, and making sense of things. And if you really go back to where these, well, I'd call it dogma nowadays, but where this trained principles come from, they come from a different place than probably most of you out there are. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Glad you liked. If you liked, share and subscribe. You know the drill. Other than that, we'll catch you next time.